On July 24th, 1997, a runner vanished while out on a run in the Shoshone National Forest near Lander, Wyoming. A talented distance runner and aspiring Olympian, she had gone out to scout a route for an upcoming race. Her car was found abandoned along a remote stretch of road with her keys, wallet, and other personal items inside. But she was never seen again. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate all of my listeners, and I love all the feedback that I get. So thank you guys so much. I am pre-recording this because when you listen to this, I will be on day 3 of 5 of a painting retreat outside of Park City. I'm not good at painting yet. I can't really sit still for very long, so I'm not sure how the painting retreat is going to go next week, but hopefully the week after I will have an update for you on if it was successful for me or if I floundered at it. So we shall see. But while I'm over there, I'm planning to do maybe a little tiny bit of hiking and paddleboarding. I go back to work in mid-August, and so I'm just a little sad to see the summer coming to a close, but just know that I am maximizing my summer, the weekends, any free time I have this summer, and even after school starts, I still do things on the weekends. So I will still be giving you guys recommendations or suggestions. In September, my husband and I are going on a road trip to Great Basin National Park in Nevada. So it's somewhere I've never been, and I'm excited to go, and I can't wait to share that update with you all. I only have one funny negative review about Shoshone National Forest. Jackson said, "Awful. Bears. Fake pictures paid for Wyoming Tourism Board. They are from Aspen, Colorado. I know because I live there. Wyoming has many bears. Stay away. It's just dust and bears. Thank you." Now, personally, I haven't done a lot in this national forest. I've driven through it and near it a few times, but I haven't done any hiking in this immediate area. So, the Shoshone National Forest is the first federally protected national forest in the United States, and it covers nearly 2.5 million acres, and it's in Wyoming. Honestly, that's kind of a cool fact that it was the first federally protected national forest. That says a lot. It was established March 3rd, 1891. Indigenous people have lived in the region for at least 10,000 years, and when the region was first explored by European adventurers, forest lands were occupied by several different tribes. Never heavily settled or exploited, the forest has retained most of its wilderness. Shoshone National Forest is a part of the Greater Yellow Ecosystem, which is a nearly unbroken expanse of federally protected lands that encompass an estimated 20 million acres. Another cool thing about the Shoshone National Forest is that it's home to all of the original plant and animal species that were present when explorers such as John Coulter and Jim Bridger first visited the region. So it's pretty much largely unchanged from when the first Europeans came over and explored this area. The forest is home to nearly all animal species found in North America, such as the grizzly bear, the black bear, gray wolf, bobcat, cougar, moose, elk, as well as the largest population of bighorn sheep in the contiguous U.S. The streams and waterways in the forest are considered to have some of the best game species fishing opportunities in the U.S., including the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. Now, because it's so large, it has a lot of recreational opportunities. There are more than 1,300 miles of hiking trails, 32 campgrounds, and adjacent forests and parklands provide numerous recreational opportunities. So this is like year-round recreation. There's snowmobiling, backpacking, hiking, fishing, canoeing. I mean, anything you can do outside, you can do here. There are 4 wilderness areas within this forest, protecting more than half of the managed land from development. From sagebrush plains through dense spruce and fir forest to craggy mountain peaks, Shoshone National Forest has a rich biodiversity rarely matched in any protected area. Now, I have heard some people say Shoshone, and I have heard Shoshone. Shoshone is the correct way of saying this name. Shoshone National Forest is named after the Shoshone Indians, who, along with other indigenous groups such as the Lakota, Crow, and Northern Cheyenne, were the major tribes encountered by the first European explorers in the region. Now, archaeology studies and evidence suggest that people have been living in the area for at least 10,000 years and probably longer. The forest provided an abundance of game meat, wood products, and shelter during the winter months from the more exposed high plains to the east. So imagine this is like, after everything I've talked about, the fishing, the game, the predators, all of the water, this was the perfect place for people to live and have it like an easy, I say easy, but accessible meat supply, whether it be fish, small game, sheep, deer. I mean, I don't know how often they ate grizzly bear back then, but people eat bear now, so I can only imagine that grizzlies might have even been on the menu way back then. And yes, I have eaten black bear before. Portions of the more mountainous regions were frequented by the Shoshone and Sioux for spiritual healing and vision quests. By the early 1840s, Washakie had become the leader of the easternmost branch of the Shoshone Indians. At the Fort Bridger Treaty Council of 1868, Washakie negotiated with the U.S. government for 44 million acres to be preserved as tribal lands. Subsequent amendments to the treaty reduced the actual acreage to approximately 2 million acres and is known today as the Wind River Indian Reservation. Again, I feel like I have to say this every episode, but stolen land. In 1957, a really interesting place called Mummy Cave was discovered by a local resident on the north side of the North Fork Shoshone River, which is adjacent to U.S. routes 14, 16, and 20. Basically, this cave had been inhabited for a very long time, and mummified remains of an individual buried inside a rock cairn were unearthed, which were dated back to 800 AD. This is considered one of the finest Paleo-Indian archaeological assemblages in the Rocky Mountain regions, and this site was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1981. So people have been living here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Going back to the early 19th century, the forest was visited by mountain men and explorers such as John Coulter, like Coulter Bay, and Jim Bridger, like Bridger Teton National Forest. Coulter is the first white man known to have visited both the Yellowstone region and the forest, which he did between 1807 and 1808. Having been an original member of the Lewis and Clark expedition, Coulter requested permission from Meriwether Lewis to leave the expedition after it had finished crossing the Rocky Mountains during their return journey to the Pacific Ocean. Now, he teamed up with 2 unaffiliated explorers the expedition had encountered along its way, but soon thereafter decided to explore regions south of where his new partners wished to venture. So they kind of just went off on their own as a little excursion from the original party. Coulter actually survived a grizzly bear attack and a pursuit by a band of Blackfeet Indians who had taken his horse. The explorer later provided William Clark, who had been his commander in the Lewis and Clark expedition, with previously unknown information on the regions he had explored, which Clark later published in 1814. Now, due to the abundance of wildlife, there was a lot of fur trading in this area as well as some gold mining. So let's talk about animals a little bit more. I think that animals come up as a theory in this case, and let's go over what kind of apex predators are in this area. There are wolves here, and in fact, there are a dozen wolf packs totaling 70 individual wolves, and that was documented in 2012. There are also cougars and grizzly bears, and those are going to be the biggest predators in this area. And I'm just saying, that's not true. I was going to say I've never been in an area with wolves, but that is not true. Wolves to me are possibly scarier than grizzly bears, but that is just me. I think I'd freak out more if I saw a wolf than a grizzly. So all that to say, a lot of big apex predators in this national forest, like all of them. Any of the ones that you can think of and name, they're in here. In terms of water, there are over 500 lakes in the forest and 1,000 miles of streams and rivers. The Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone River is federally designated as a wild and scenic river for 22 miles through the Shoshone National Forest. There are cliffs that tower 2,000 feet above the river as the river winds through gorges. So today's case is about Amy Roe Bechtel. This is a very famous case in true crime, and so you likely have heard of this one before. Amy was born in 1972 in California. She was born to Dwayne and Joanne Roe, and she was the youngest of 4 children. Shortly after Amy's birth, her family relocated to Jackson, Wyoming. Now, she was primarily raised in Jackson and Douglas, Wyoming. And in 1992, while attending the University of Wyoming, Amy met her future husband, Steve. After graduating, the two moved to Lander, Wyoming, and they actually got married in June of 1996. Now, just over a year into their marriage, on the morning of July 24th, 1997, Amy told Steve that she planned on doing several errands in town after teaching a children's weightlifting class at the Wind River Fitness Center. After teaching her class, she called in at the Camera Connection photo store at 2:30 p.m. and then stopped by a store called Gallery 331. She had a conversation with the owner, whose name is Greg Wagner, and this was actually the last confirmed sighting of Amy. Now, after she left the photo shop, she drove to the area near the Shoshone National Forest to map out the course of a 10K run that she was organizing with a local gym. Amy was an avid distance runner with a marathon personal record of 3:1 and aspired to qualify for the 2000 Olympic marathon trials, and she was really on her way there. She was extremely talented physically. She did so much in her community, and she was very, very fit and very in shape. Now, this day, she was wearing a yellow or gold tank top, blue or black shorts, Adidas Trail Response sneakers, a Timex Ironman triathlon watch, wow, and a small double wedding band on her left ring finger. She may have been seen running along the loop road because a footprint similar to her sneaker was found there but destroyed before police could attempt to match it. This is the day that Amy disappeared, and when she went missing, her husband Steve had actually traveled with a friend to another city in Wyoming to scout rock climbing routes. So they were pretty much an independent couple. She was able to go do things that she liked to do without him and vice versa. So this wasn't anything abnormal. This was pretty common for Amy, especially because she was trying to train for the Olympic marathon trials. So, she went out to go scout out a trail for her to run. And at 4:30 p.m., 2 hours later from when she was last seen, Steve returned home, and he was surprised not to see Amy back at the house by that time. He reported her missing to the police at 10:30 p.m. that night. And when he called, and I've heard the recording, you could probably look it up. It's most likely on YouTube. This is what he said to the 911 operator. Yeah, hey, I've got a missing person here, I think, and I wondered if you had a spare around any place. You might be thinking, like, what the heck? That is something really weird to say. If your wife is missing, she hasn't returned home from her run, and you don't know where she is. There has been a lot of speculation. There's been a lot of judgment surrounding this phone call to when he was reporting her missing. I can't tell you either way. You kind of just have to make of it what you will. I think this is odd to say, especially if you're really concerned that your wife is missing. She could be hurt on a trail somewhere. She could have been attacked. She could have fallen. But this is what Steve said. And a lot of people say, hey, if you haven't been in that position, you don't know how you would react. And that is true. Some people cope with awkward or tense situations with humor. And maybe this was Steve's way of doing that. So he reported her missing. He explained to the police that she'd not returned home from her run. And the next day, her unlocked white Toyota Tercel wagon was found around half a mile from Fry Lake, which was at the end of the 10K hill run that she was planning. Now, this area is where Loop Road joins the Burnt Gulch turnoff. There was no sign of Amy, but her sunglasses, her to-do list, and her car keys were all left on the passenger seat, like she was planning to return relatively quickly. But her wallet wasn't found. Now, there were no signs of foul play or a struggle inside or near the vehicle. They didn't find like the ground outside, kind of like scuffled up. They didn't find blood or anything in the car. Basically, it looked like she had gotten out of her car, grabbed her wallet, and walked away and just vanished. Now, during the course of the search for Amy, there was actually a sighting. Jem and Wendy Gibson, owners of the Landers Pronghorn Lodge, they actually told investigators that they passed a slender blonde woman wearing dark shorts running in the same direction they were traveling on Loop Road, which would have been away from town. And they said that they saw her late on the afternoon of July 24th. The reason why Jem and Wendy were out there is because they had relatives visiting from Nebraska, and they wanted to take the relatives up the mountain for some pre-dinner sightseeing. And Wendy recalled thinking it was unusual because as they were driving by, that it was so weird that someone was running like way, way up there. They obviously didn't know that Amy was training for the Olympics, but they still made note of it, and that was significant enough for them to report it to the police. Jim actually made a joke, and he said, "She looks like she's running away from something." She was basically going pretty fast. And on the way back to town at Burnt Gulch, Wendy noticed a dirty white vehicle, but she really didn't have any reason to connect it with the woman runner that they'd just seen. Wendy remembers seeing something red in the car, something that reminded her of camping. A little farther towards town, they actually noticed a gray truck with half a load of logs and a man standing nearby shirtless, holding a plastic container. So after the search was launched for Amy, this was basically the first tip that they got for Amy's search. The search began with just Steve and 24 of his friends, but later that day, they employed ATVs, dogs, dirt bikes, and over 100 volunteers were looking They were all out looking for any signs of Amy. The next day, horses and helicopters joined in, and by the third day, the search area had been expanded to a 30-mile radius. That's a pretty big radius. Even though they knew that, what her route was going to be that day, they still searched so far out every way. By 3 a.m., July 25th, an extensive search for Amy was underway from law enforcement as well as friends and family and Steve. And by July 27th, police were receiving roughly 1,000 calls per day with tips and potential leads in Amy's disappearance. So that is a ton, especially for this kind of like small-ish area. They also searched mines and various lakes, and they didn't find anything of Amy's. So 5 days after Amy disappeared on July 29th, when the search turned into a full-blown criminal investigation, and how that came to be was 25 FBI agents arrived from Denver and Virginia and from elsewhere in Wyoming. And these FBI agents set up shop in the sheriff's office, and they began to question anybody who knew anything about Amy. So this is really weird to me because typically the FBI do not investigate missing persons. I always say this, and it sounds interesting because this happens in a few cases that we have discussed here on Morbid Outdoors, but FBI, they don't investigate missing persons. And so for me, it's really weird that 25 of them came to question people. Captain Larry Makeshine at the tribal police headquarters in Fort Washakie, he heard about Amy's disappearance soon after it happened. But Fremont County authorities never contacted his office directly, which is weird. Makeshine also heard that the FBI had sent in 25 agents, and he was absolutely mystified. He said, "I'm not questioning it, but if I'm going to be quoted, I'd say I'd never seen it done that way before." Even after the FBI came and left, no one could find anything of Amy or her remains because at this time, investigators all thought Amy had fallen and been injured in the forest, been run over on the road, or maybe even was attacked by a bear or a mountain lion. But then the focus of the investigation turned to Steve, especially as spouses commit many murders. And if you're new here, I usually always say it's always the husband because statistically speaking, it usually is. So everyone starts kind of turning to Steve. They can't find Amy's body anywhere in the forest. They didn't find anything that belonged to her. There were no clues. It was literally like she vanished into thin air. So, Steve starts to look like a suspect. Amy and Steve had been married just for over a year and both worked part-time jobs at Wild Iris, which was a local climbing shop. Amy also waited tables at the Sweetwater Grill, and like I said earlier, she taught a youth weightlifting class at the Wind River Fitness Center. Amy and Steve actually had just recently bought a house in Lander, and they planned to move in during the upcoming weeks, so they weren't even moved into their new house together when she went missing. Now, the main reason why investigators started to look at Steve as a suspect is because they uncovered a series of his journals that described violence towards women and specifically his wife, Amy. Detectives interrogated Steve on August 1st, 1997, falsely claiming to have evidence proving that he had murdered Amy. And in response to this, Steve just terminated the interview. He basically just said, "I'm not doing this," and left. Now, Steve's explanation for the journals, he said that all of that was actually lyrics he had written for his band, and that they had nothing to do with Amy or her disappearance. I don't know if I really buy that because that sounds like a stinking load of BS. In 1998, local police stated that Steve was not a central suspect in the case, but that they had wanted to clear him of suspicion following other leads, which they could not do after his lack of cooperation. Steve did provide an alibi for the time of Amy's disappearance, which was corroborated by friends who agreed they had all spent the afternoon with him rock climbing. However, on the advice of criminal defense attorney Kent Spence, Steve refused to submit a polygraph test. Additionally, a woman driving through the area from where Amy disappeared claimed to have seen a truck matching Steve's. Now, I do want to say, it's always the husband. But in this case, I just don't know. Was it Steve? Did he do something? Did they get married? Did he regret getting married to Amy for whatever reasons? Were the journals real and not, in fact, song lyrics for his band? Or did Amy just have an accident outside and no one has found her yet? That seems less likely to me than foul play. It could have been a random person that saw this woman jogging and decided to seize an opportunity. We all know how often that happens in the United States. And if you're a foreign listener, I don't know if it happens a lot from where you live, but in the US, women going on jogs or running in parks, national forest, wherever, they are often assaulted, abducted, raped, or killed. And it is a terrible epidemic in America. So that could have happened to Amy. Someone random might have seen her, seized the opportunity, and disposed of her somewhere else. We really don't know. However, I do think it's interesting that Steve had those journals and that someone actually said they saw a car matching Steve's in that kind of area. I don't know. I just think it's all very suspicious. Amy's family is still waiting on answers. In late August 1997, the FBI requested satellite photos from NASA of the area on the day of Amy's disappearance, but unfortunately, the satellite photos did not provide any information. In January 1998, satellite images taken by the Russian space station Mir were also obtained by the FBI, but they revealed nothing of note. Just want to put it out there, it's really strange that the FBI is getting images taken by a Russian space station for this missing woman. It's just strange. And to me, it feels like, does the FBI know something that the general public doesn't know? So let's talk theories. The first theory is, what they thought in the beginning, that Amy may have fallen on her run or been attacked by wild animals while she was out in the wilderness. But I don't think this is what happened, and that's because there was no evidence of any clothing, torn or otherwise. There was no blood, no body parts or bones. Nothing has ever been found. It's literally like someone just grabbed her off the trail and drove her far, far away, leaving nothing behind. Now, let's talk about Steve. This is another theory a lot of people, I think, lean to, is that he is responsible for Amy's disappearance. Now, just a week and a half after Amy vanished, Steve hired lawyers, and he refused to take a polygraph test, which further raised suspicions for many residents as well as the media. Like I said, detectives did interrogate him, and his truck, or one matching his truck, was seen in the area at around the time that Amy disappeared. Now, Amy's brother, Nels, was furious at Steve's reluctance to take the polygraph test and cooperate fully with investigators. When her sisters, Casey Lee and Jenny Newton, appeared on the Geraldo Rivera show on February 3rd, 1998, the host pleaded for Steve to cooperate more with authorities. Nell told the sheriff about when Amy and Steve were over for dinner one night. Nell noticed that Amy had some bruising, but she made a joke saying that Steve can get a little rough sometimes. Ew, gross. Nell found Amy's reaction odd, saying, "Amy just laughed it off, but would not look me in the eye. And I said, that is not a normal reaction, particularly for Amy. So family members say that Steve was likely physically abusing Amy, and that is absolutely terrible. And I think most of us know that if your husband is going to hit you, he could also murder you. In June 2003, a Timex Ironman digital watch was discovered by a doctor hiking near the Popo Aggie River, and he turned it in to the police. It was noted to be similar to a watch that Amy had owned at the time of her disappearance. However, law enforcement was unable to determine whether or not the watch belonged to her. That's a really weird thing to happen, that a watch was discovered and I don't know, it wasn't discovered during the extensive searches, but then in 2003 it was. So eventually, Steve had Amy declared legally dead, and in 2004, he married someone. He married a woman named Ellen Sisman, and they actually have 2 kids now. So, I don't know. It just feels odd. I mean, his wife goes missing in 97, and then 4 years later, he has already had her declared dead and marries someone else. It's a little suspicious to me, but I want to know what you guys think. So Steve has remained the prime person of interest in Amy's disappearance for many years. And in July 2007, the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, Roger Reiser, the detective who succeeded Dave King on this case, he actually commented on the cold case to the Billings Gazette. He said, "In my mind, there is only one person that I want to talk to, only one who has refused to talk to law enforcement, and that's her husband." A lot of you might be saying or thinking, he has a right to his privacy. He has a right not to talk to the police. And I agree, he does. But I think that if your wife is missing and you don't want to cooperate, I don't know. There's 2 sides of the coin. Is he not cooperating because he wants to protect himself because he knows it's always the husband? Or is he not talking because he knows something more and he doesn't want to incriminate himself? I don't know. I just think it's very suspicious. Sorry, guys, that was my dog barking at a plastic bag outside of our house. Another theory is that Amy was murdered by a man named Dale Wayne Eaton, also known as the Great Basin serial killer. So a tip came in from a man named Richard Eaton who told the sheriff that his itinerant brother, Dale, may have been involved in Amy's disappearance. However, the investigators ignored the information as they were focused on Steve at the time. And by not pursuing the lead, they may have allowed the notorious Great Basin serial killer to get away, as on July 30th, 1998, nearly a year after Amy's disappearance, Dale Eaton was finally arrested for another murder. You have probably heard this story too, but in an area less than 3 hours from Lander, Shannon Breeden, her husband Scott, and their 5-month-old baby Cody, they were all traveling when their van broke down at a pullout along Interstate 80. Dale stopped his off-green 85 Dodge van and assisted them. What a nice thing to do. He asked Shannon to drive. He then pulled a rifle from the back of the van, kidnapped the family at gunpoint, and directed them south of the highway into the desert. Shannon accelerated and turned in a tight circle instead, which enabled Scott to jump out of the van with the baby and Shannon to get out the other side. Scott grabbed Dale and hit him over the head with the rifle butt. And after a struggle, Dale was stabbed with his knife and left while the family drove away, speeding away for their lives. Now, when Richard called to report his brother, Richard actually called because he knew that Dale had been camping in the Burnt Gulch area at the time of Amy's disappearance. Scary. And he was around 7,860 feet, which, kind of was around at the elevation Amy was would have been marking her 10K route. And coincidentally, this was a favorite elk hunting and trout fishing spot that, both of the brothers, Richard and Dale, frequented. But after Richard called police with his suspicions, the detectives, they dismissed the tip and they believed the word of Dale's niece, who said he was visiting her in Greeley, Colorado on July 24th. Ugh. A $100,000 reward for information leading to the resolution of Amy's case meant that investigators were suspicious of Richard's motives. I just don't know, because it seems like Richard knew that his brother was evil and he was suspicious. And typically family members do not turn in other family members just for a little money. I mean, some might, but Richard knew that his brother was dangerous, and it was proven a year later. Now, a plea bargain deal for the attempted kidnapping of the Breeden family meant that Dale would serve just 99 days in jail. He's obviously a dangerous person, yet they only gave him 99 days. But a sample of his DNA was taken while he was incarcerated. Now, he was allowed to continue to work on welding and construction jobs while at a halfway house due to prison overcrowding. On June 16, 1998, he failed to report to work despite strict parole conditions, and a warrant was put out for his arrest. Police finally spotted his van more than a month later near Dubois, in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. He was arrested, and a shotgun was found in his van, leading to his imprisonment on federal weapons charges. On March 25, 1988, 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel was driving alone from Denver to visit a friend in Billings, Montana. Her black 1988 Honda CX-Sci, which had a Montana plate with Lil Miss on it. Now, she was planning to visit her boyfriend in Cody, Wyoming, but she never got there. And 8 days later, 2 fishermen found her body in the North Platte River near Casper. Autopsy results showed that she had been raped, bludgeoned, and stabbed. After her family buried her, a strange note signed Stringfellow Hawk was found on Lisa's grave. In July 2002, investigators researching cold cases examined the seminal DNA from Lisa's rape and found a match to, who do you guess? Dale Wayne Eaton. He was due to stand trial, and he's just a piece of shit. And he actually was due to stand trial that fell on a manslaughter charge after killing his cellmate with a lethal punch to the man's vertebral artery. Now, going back to the note, a handwriting analysis from the note on Lisa's grave also matched Eaton. Now, handwriting, some people say it's junk science, but I'm just going off of what I read online. Then, following a tip from neighbors who remembered seeing Dale digging in his yard, Lisa's car was found buried on his property in Moneta, just an hour and 45-minute drive east from Lander. So he'd been using the car as a septic tank. A portion of the Montana license plate, Lil Miss, was found nearby. And inside his trailer, authorities also found women's clothing and purses and newspaper reports about other murdered women. So this guy is likely a serial killer. Investigators determined that Dale had kidnapped Lisa at a remote rest area in Waltman, then held her captive in a converted school bus, and repeatedly raped her before murdering her. An FBI profiler who examined the case said Dale's behavior all fitted that of a serial killer. In a subsequent trial, Dale was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection in March 2004. He had a stay of execution in December 2009, with his lawyers arguing that he was mentally unfit to stand trial. Yeah, he was mentally fucked up, is what I would say. In November 2014, a U.S. district judge overturned his death sentence, which was commuted to life in prison. In 2010, Detective Sergeant Zarga traveled with an FBI agent to Colorado to try and interview him, but Eaton refused to speak with them. With the threat of the death penalty no longer hanging over him, investigators really did not have a lot of leverage. So, with all of that to be said, is it possible that Dale killed Amy? Yes, I really believe so. And he has actually been asked about Amy's disappearance, and he refuses to say anything. So, in my mind, there are two possible theories that might have happened. First, abusive husband. The theory that Steve murdered Amy. I think that's possible. Second, I think Dale is may be responsible for Amy's disappearance as well, especially if his brother Richard said he was in that area during the time that she disappeared. And I would be eager to know if, those newspaper clippings about other murdered women, I'd be eager to know if anything about Amy was in those newspapers. Amy's case did get a lot of media attention. The case was profiled in People magazine and Outside in 1998, as well as the television series Unsolved Mysteries. It was later profiled on the series Disappeared in 2013 and was the subject of an extensive article featured in Runner's World in 2016. Amy's disappearance is discussed by John Bellman in his 2020 book, The Cold Vanish. Now, I haven't read this book yet, but it is on my list to read for this year, and I have had many people say that this is a great book. So, Amy is not the only unsolved case from Lander. There have been unsolved murders there. A woman and 2 children disappeared in 1980, and her blood-spattered car was found 30 miles outside of town, but their bodies were never found. No one who knows or knew Amy seems to believe that she would simply cut all traces and disappear, that she could impose that kind of open-ended pain for those she left behind, like her friends and family. So no one really knows what happened to Amy Bechtel that one July day. It has been 28 years, and Amy is still missing. Steve is still a suspect, and Amy's case remains open, but cold. And if you have any information on Amy's disappearance, please contact the Fremont County Sheriff's Office at 307-332-5611. As always, recreate responsibly, and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.